with Jesse Miller, who has a new podcast called The Kids Are All Right.
The Kids Are All Right.
Are you a Who fan?
A little bit, but it's very much an approach to talking to parents about some of the perils that we hear about in headlines and taking those perils, scaling them down, and bringing a 21st century viewpoint on 20th century values.
So we've grabbed Jesse to have a conversation here on Bench Banter to really sort of give some usable, tangible tips to parents who may or may not realize that they are putting their kids in a precarious position by doing some of the simplest of things, like back to school in front of the house with the address right here.
Yeah.
That's a more than just a little faux pas.
Well, it can be. And I think what's important to think about is how we approach the story of storytelling. Because parents want the world to know what's happening in their kids' lives. And the hard part there is that there's an affirmation piece. It's the look at what we're doing, look at where we've been, look at all the great things we're doing. And because of on-demand sharing, the world now has the ability to see where you are in real time, which means if somebody does want to get close to your home, not just for the predation piece, but for the I want to break into this house, maybe we scale back on advertising the front steps of the door, because you always have the potential of sharing too much that way. But if you're doing it while you're on vacation and telling we're away in Disneyland, and now somebody can get into your house because they know that no one's there.
With a little scroll back on your Instagram or what have
exactly.
you. It's like, oh, they're in Hawaii. Let me go to...
Yeah, and also the other part just being how easy is it to figure out some of the codes we have in life. So like our alarm codes, our front door codes, we have a lot of automation. It's amazing to hear how many people just still use their children's birth date as the code to get into your house.
No, they don't.
They do. But then you flip it around, now scrolling through mom's Facebook account and you find the date of birth, how easy is it to put puzzle pieces together. So safety of the home doesn't just start with the idea of knocking things down on the internet. It's about creating sensible patterns of we don't need to advertise this much today.
That's a great piece of advice. And for many people, life can get complicated after you've already posted where you go to school, where you live, what kind of car you drive, perhaps your license plate number. There are a lot of things that aren't just for kids, but for everybody, for internet safety.
Yeah, and I think what's important to recognize is where you live. And here we are today filming in beautiful Vancouver. Canada has a lot of privacy laws that don't allow somebody just to look up your license plate online and figure out information. Contrast, if we're in the United States, that's a very big focal point because there's a lot more public access to records. So somebody then cross-referencing a license plate with something identifiable like a DMV record, those are the pieces that you have to keep in mind, where you live and what are the rules around privacy and where you are. But most importantly, I would say with our kids, parents overshare. And there's actually a term, it's called sharenting. It's the idea that...
Hold on. Let that sink in for a second.
Yeah.
Sharenting.
Yeah.
That's an important piece. I think that's going to land in the Webster's Dictionary next year. Because what is the line, Jesse? Where is that? This is sharing on social media and this is sharenting.
Sharing your children online is something that a lot of parents do without an idea of consequence. And the hard part with scaling it back is that you're sometimes taking away a person's power to tell the story of their life. But the reality within this is that there's going to be a whole generation of children who have had their lives documented and put online, where it's not them sharing it, it's the parents building a story, and the parents building a searchable index of every life moment that they thought was pertinent to be put online. So for parents, the question is, what do you want your child's digital profiles and portfolios to look like as they age? And do you want it to be just based on your own whims, or do you want it to be curated and controlled in a way that you feel would be reflective of a traditional photo album?
Because it's not like that, high-8 film that you would have on a reel-to-reel or the slideshow. Some people are like, what's that?
Yeah.
That's what it used to be. You would have it and you'd keep it in your personal vault so you could look back on it, that photo album. Now our photo albums live online and in a cloud and on Facebook and on Instagram. It's a whole next level of sharing publicly.
And previous generations were limited not only in the technology, but the economic cost. So the idea of us taking 24 photos of ourselves on a roll of film and dropping it off at
I still love that.
It's such a kind of, you have to wait for the moment, right? Yeah. You got your photos back, half of them were horrible.
Half, at least.
At least. But the contrast here is that in an economy where it's easy to share because you don't have an economic cost of distribution, you have parents who believe that every waking moment of the child's life has to go on the internet. And so the hard part here for some parents to hear might be that to protect your child's privacy and self online long term, you might need to be the one scaling back how the child is shared online, not the child themselves.
That is a great piece of advice. Let's take it to the next level of of age group, perhaps, with regard to what teenagers might share online. I have a couple of teens that I've seen online, and you try and tell a teenager, perhaps you and your buddies underage drinking or taking big drags off a joint aren't the #1 videos you should be posting online. And they look at you and say, whatever, old lady.
Yeah, I think we actually have a lot of kids who make sensible choices with how they share aspects of partying. It's actually when you're at that point where you can't control your behavior, which sometimes happens at parties, where then maybe the people you trust are going to be the exploiters. So it's the best friend who makes a video of you drinking, the best friend who makes a picture or video of you go viral because you're choosing to make a choice around alcohol or drugs. The hard part here for kids is asking the audience that you participate with, are you sharing something that we think is important to share because it's the moment, or should we scale a little bit this back? And what I'm hearing from a lot of students, especially around grad, is saying no phones.
Right, code.
No phones. We're having a party, no phones. We don't want any documentation of this. And that's kind of cool to think about in the sense that they're actually scaling aspects of their own social sharing and making it so that the person who is up for a scholarship doesn't get that scholarship taken away. A lot of kids are actually being cognizant of not necessarily documenting friends in compromising situations that might, bring them into a point of peril tomorrow.
For me personally, being in the sort of the sports broadcast world for so long, I'm shocked at how many up-and-coming Major League Baseball players or up-and-coming football players are finding themselves in a position where they need to apologize with things they've done and said on social media as teenagers.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The past year, I think we've had 3 high-profile sports events where people who had signed contracts and they've been drafted and they've been playing in the league for a couple of years have got themselves in some trouble based on some tweets surfacing, which boggles my mind because you would think that these high-profile organizations would actually be taking the time to vet that content. But that being said, sometimes some things kind of float underneath the radar and they only surface after somebody on the other side of the coin who doesn't like that team or doesn't like that player decides to go and do some digging. But the reality within this is that we spend a lot of time shaming the internet. And the hard part for kids is this kind of pressure of be careful what you post online, because if you do this, you're never going to move forward. And I think the thing that we can take away from it is that people do move forward. You just have to be prepared to deal with the consequences.
Now, Jesse, you know this from being in broadcasting, getting your message out, whether it be through podcasting or on radio and television. We know when we step in front of a camera or we post something on social media, we know what we're taking on. There's this sort of new level of that downside of celebrity that is now associated with a strong brand on social media. I know some kids that are in their late teens who have hundreds and hundreds of followers, and that kind of makes them a celebrity, and there can be a downside to celebrity if you don't recognize what you're getting yourself into. Yeah,
and kids curate audiences, and that's really interesting to think of the potential behind that in the positive or negative. If we look at child stars that we now 20 years later, the fall from grace and where are they now, there is a bit of an impact on kids when it comes down to these audiences that they build on social media. What's important for kids to recognize is that not everybody's your friend online. And if you try and run them in parallel, well, you have your list of friends and you have your list of followers because you're a gamer or you're developing media content that's getting some attention. You really have to start not only including people who have the benefit of their life experience, but the benefit of how can we take this and help you become proactively productive with it. And the proactively productive means you're asking yourself, am I a brand or am I a person? And that hard part there is that you can be both. But if you are going to be in front of the camera, which a lot of kids are in their own way of taking their photos or building something online, they have to include people who have their best interest at heart.
And parents who do that to the kids where they don't really necessarily understand the consequence of that.
Yeah, and I'd say, unfortunately, a lot of parents treat their child like a commodity on social media and says, I post my child online, I get lots of likes. Just because it makes you feel good does not mean long-term it's going to make your child feel good. And parents need to understand that what photo is taken today might look a lot different in 25 years when your child's saying, I really had a hard time getting past the fact that anybody can Google me and find the photos you put on the internet.
We'd love your thoughts on this edition of Bench Banter. Thank you, Jesse Miller.
Thank you.